What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me here on episode 96 of the 90 Feet from Home Fantasy Baseball Podcast. It has been a very long time since we've done a show here. I apologize for putting the show on hiatus over the offseason. Lots of busy stuff going on in my life. Had to take a pause doing shows at Fantasy Pros and doing a lot of stuff over there. But we are back. We are going to be ramping up the previews, starting with catcher. And there's nobody better to talk catcher with than my dear friend and occasional co-host, KC Bubba, who you can find over on Twitter at BDentric, the most prolific podcaster in all the land. Bubba does stuff like literally constantly doing podcasts that you should definitely be checking out with Ryan Bloomfield, with Ben Tidd. Tons of great stuff. Bubba, thank you so much for joining me today, my friend.
Always a pleasure, Joe. It's great catching up with you before the show. It's always great chatting with you. And we get to talk the best position in baseball today. So I'm very much looking forward to it. It's always nice being on the other side of the podcast where I don't have to host it. So this is great for me.
Yeah, it's a bit of a reversal. Last time we did a show together, I was on your show talking about my beloved Blue Jays. But today we are going to be doing catchers. And before we get into the actual pool, catchers are your specialty. Is there anything in particular people should know going into their drafts with catchers? Any particular strategies? It does vary between one catcher and two catcher leagues, but general thoughts you have on the position before we really jump in here.
Well, first off, hashtag catchers matter. Let's get that straight right out the gate for all those like to punt catching. But it does depend a ton on is it one catcher or two catcher. On one catcher, you'll hear the philosophy take an elite catcher because it puts you over the group. I'm more prone to just, if it flows in the draft, I'll take a catcher. Otherwise, I'll almost treat it like a defense or a kicker in football, and I'll stream, especially if it's 12 team or less with the one catcher. Big difference there. Two catchers, on the other hand, I want to get at least one of my top 6 or 7 guys potentially, maybe top 10, but usually I want to leave with 2 in my top 15. Especially in two catcher leagues, because if you're in a 12-team league, that's 24 catchers. It starts dropping off pretty quick, like we'll talk about today, after about 15 or 16, depending on where you want to sit there. That last 8 or 9 catchers that have to get drafted, it's a murky situation. So I'm a little more aggressive in a two-catcher format because I'd rather not be drawing dead with one of those positions. And some of these guys, like we'll talk about, do benefit in a big way for that position. So that's my situation with it. One catcher league, a lot more flexible. In two catcher league, much more like on track type thing.
Yeah, I wait as long as I possibly can in one catcher leagues, try and get around pick 200 or even beyond potentially if you can. In those two catcher leagues, you can't really wait as much. You can try. Like there have been some leagues this year where I go with like Kirk and Patrick Bailey, the Toronto San Francisco combo here, or something along those lines. But I'm doing an NFBC 50 right now, and I went with Wilson Contreras and Cal Raleigh in the first 10 rounds to kind of just lock it down. A lot of plate appearances. Not something I usually do, but it's something I figured I would try at least once or twice. And I kind of like it because it frees you up. You don't have to worry about when is the last decent catcher going to be gone. I don't have to be checking Ivan Herrera or any of these guys. I can just kind of wait now, and I will have to take some reserve catchers, but I kind of like taking care of it earlier than later in those two catcher formats, like you said, Bubba.
Yeah, in those drafted hold formats too, there is a lot to be said about going too early because then you can totally wait on your third catcher like for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Where if you take like one good one and then you kind of wait a bit for that second one, you almost have to come back quickly with the third one to kind of keep the balance of the team. And you might even need to draft a fourth one depending on how you go. Where if you get 2 studs out the gate, you can't predict injuries, but you're pretty much only going 3 catchers for sure, and you can wait quite a bit. So that changes the philosophy as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like at least nailing down one, and then maybe if you want to speculate on the second one, but at the very least, taking one early, not super early. You don't necessarily need William Contreras or Cal or Raleigh or Yainer Diaz or Rutschman, but just knocking down one of those top 10 or 15 at least is something I really like to do. Before we jump in here, just want to let you guys know Bet Online is one of our sponsors of the show. It's one of the most trusted betting platforms in the world and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA, college basketball, the NHL, UFC. Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, Bet Online has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online, the game starts here. All right. We are going to share the screen here if I can get it working, which I should be able to do. And we are going to talk about some of these ADPs. And yeah, that's what's happening when I haven't done a show in a while. I can't get the thing up for a second, so give me 1 second to get these ADPs up, Bubba. In terms of the early catchers, the top couple that are going, um, do you find that generally speaking, you end up with one of those top tier? I know you said like early catch, like in the top 15 or so, but when it comes to those top of the position guys, Contreras, Diaz, Rutschman, Salvi, Perez, do you find that you land on them regularly, or you shop a little bit later on?
I would love to end up on them regularly, but it's been shopping a little later on, unfortunately. William is elite. Hits for a great average, has 25 to 30 home run appeals, steals some bags. He's a 5 category stud at catcher, which you don't find very often, but his ADP is 25. So in a 12-team league, he's like late second, early third. And that is a little too rich for me, unfortunately. Yiner Diaz, I have been landing on a little bit more of late as draft season moves along, and the catcher profiles seem to be locking in the draft rooms now, because catchers are kind of dropping for a while. Now they're kind of getting pushed around a little bit in later drafts. So Yiner, I've been going to a bit more with his ADP closer to 50 to 60 in that range. And I like him mainly because he is an elite batting average guy. Dude hit like 311 in the second half last year, hit 299 on the season. These are things you do not see at the catcher's position. He underperformed in power. So if you can find a 20 plus home run season, hits like fifth or sixth in that Houston lineup is still pretty good. I do like Yiner a lot. Like, I don't think he's going to be as good as William because he doesn't run. But I like Yiner, kind of off of Adley, been off of Adley for a long time. It's just been a personal thing of mine. And then Salvador Perez. I don't mind him. Haven't really drafted him a ton, though, because the batting average is a sink, and I am scared of father time with him.
Yeah, I do worry with Perez. I mean, if you look at the projections, if you look at player rate, like if you put the ATC projections into the player rater on Fangraphs, he's the number 3 projected catcher, 24 homers, 85 ribbies, 255. I wonder what the split will be between catching and playing first base this year. 91 times behind the plate, 49 times at first. Do you think he's a full-time first baseman at this point and it's Freddie Fermin behind the dish, or do you think he still gets some reps back there?
So yeah, this is my other concern with him. That's a great point you mentioned, because he got all those reps at DH and first base, but Vinny Pasquantino has had shoulder issues for 2 straight years. So
Yeah.
again, that could happen again. He could get hurt, but as long as Vinny's healthy, Vinny's playing first base, which takes away reps from Salvi or Freddie Fermin. You could DH Salvi a lot. I think that's something they might want to do. Like, I think Fermin still plays closer to 40% of games at catcher. I just think it's the way of the world, and they'll
Yeah.
try to put Salvi at DH, or maybe give Vinny a day off and put him at first or something. But Salvi's still going to get a ton of reps at catcher. That's just what he's going to do, and until the knees stop working. But it just concerns me, because I'd rather, at that point where we are in the pocket of ADPs there, I'd rather wait for the guy going after him, or a couple guys going a few picks later. So I like Salvi a lot. I'm just worried about, like, I think he's going so high because of the playing time we've seen lately. I don't know how secure that is anymore.
Yeah, I think I agree. At his age, he's going to be 35 this year. He's been pretty stable the last couple of years, 158 and 140, but you never know how that's going to work going into your mid 30s at this point. Um, in terms of the 5th catcher going, Wilson Contreras, I think he might be my favorite. And I mentioned that I drafted him. I drafted him in the 12 teamer, and I think I drafted him one other time this year, and I want to get so much of him, but he's really expensive. So it's somebody that I'm not taking in every draft. ADP of 71 on the NFBC, but he is somebody who will be moving to first with Ivan Herrera, taking that time behind the plate. Are you as interested in Wilson Contreras as the rest of the industry seems to be?
100%. The fact he's going to primarily play first base opens up so many things, because in recent years, injuries have derailed his seasons, but those injuries were catcher related injuries for the most part, like foul tip off the hand, different hit situations essentially, or hit by pitch while he's in the box, things you can't predict. He did have like one soft tissue injury, so that's always less than ideal. But playing him at first base should limit a lot of these things. A big fan of that, because even when he was on the field, I can't even say healthy last year, when he was on the field,
Yeah.
still hit for a good average. He's got tons of power. Like, I'd take him over Salvi in a heartbeat. I think if we do see William play 140 plus games because of the first base juice, he's up there with Yiner at second at the position for me. Like, I believe that's a big thing. And that's something I think a lot of people believe in, like you said, because another thing, as we keep going down this list, if you're on the ADP page for the NFBC, you look at mins and maxes for most of these catchers, they're like 30 to 40 picks. So that's where I was kind of referencing wanting to get certain catchers and not getting certain catchers, because depending on your draft, guys are jumping up for him way more than you'd expect. So like some positions ADPs kind of are pretty solid. Catchers all over the board. So if you like a dude, go get him. Wilson is a dude I like a lot. So if you enter a draft saying you have to get him, be aggressive, because someone else in your draft probably feels the same way.
I like him a lot in one catcher leagues too, like the Yahoo leagues, and the ADP there it's quite a bit lower because those are one catcher leagues. And I think he's in like the 110 or 120 range, which is generally a little bit earlier than I want to take a catcher in a one catcher league. But if you're playing in a 12 teamer and it's like the 10th, 11th, 12th round, and you're getting that first baseman that you can put behind the plate and for fantasy purposes, I kind of love that. And I think Wilson has at least an outside chance to finish as the number one catcher. I don't think it's likely. I think the likeliest outcome is that his brother does it, considering the stability at the batting average, the fact he's going to steal a couple bases. But Wilson Contreras, he could hit 30 home runs and drive in 100, and it wouldn't really surprise me if he's able to stay on the field. Out of that top five, would it be safe to say that Wilson is your favorite target and Rutschman's your biggest fade?
In the top five, well, in a perfect world, I want William, but yes, Wilson's my biggest target because of what I actually get to do in my draft. So I'm with you there. And yes, Adley is a fade for me. Like he's like the Sandy Alcantara of catchers. He has to accumulate, and I think he gets hit the worst out of most of these guys up here if he does miss time. So yeah, Adley's my fade. Wilson is my dude if I can in this range.
Totally agree with you. Rutschman, he was just not that impressive down the stretch. I feel like he's going to be a lot better than that, probably, but he's expensive. You got to pay a fourth rounder, sometimes maybe a fifth rounder. It just doesn't feel as stable as the guys going around him. As like I would much rather pay up even a few picks earlier for Yainer Diaz or just wait another round on Wilson. So I do agree with you there. The next block of five: Cal Raleigh, Will Smith, Shea Langoliers, Logan O'Hoppe, and JT Realmuto. Out of this group, Bubba, I don't find myself landing on them a ton. I drafted Cal Raleigh earlier, like I mentioned, and I have a couple of shares of JT Realmuto, who I'm kind of interested in. What are your thoughts on this range? Do you like to shop here?
I am not here very often. That is a thing. So like I'm either getting one of the early ones or I'm double tapping right after this is what it comes down to. And if I'm in this range, like I do like Shea Bangaliers. He's the cheap version of Cal Raleigh, going like 40 picks later. Nothing against Cal, but if I can wait 40 picks, I'll take Langoliers. Both batting average, problems, but 30 plus home run guys. Like it's ridiculous. So I don't mind that. Logan O'Hoppe, I'm still a believer in. I know there were concerns last year. Everyone was talking Travis d'Arnaud as well. Travis d'Arnaud's I could see him platooning more with Nolan Shenwell at first base than with Logan O'Hoppe. O'Hoppe's still going to get his 130 plus games behind the dish. The talent's still very much real with Logan O'Hoppe. So those are the two guys I'm looking at as Langoliers and O'Hoppe. But for the most part, I avoid this range. Like Will Smith, I have zero interest in ever. Cal Raleigh, I don't mind. JTR, it's like he's starting to become in a price range where I get it now. I get it because he used to go so high because he ran unlike other catchers. Doesn't run anymore. Had 2 steals last year, multiple knee injuries, getting older. He's probably going to get more days off. So he's getting in a world where I could see the ADP making sense. I'm just still out because the knee injuries scare me. Like they bothered him a lot last year.
That's fair. I've been digging into the numbers, and I was surprised by how good they are. Like the barrel rate still in double digits. The sprint speed was still pretty good. I wonder if we can maybe get 7 steals out of him or something like that, which even if you get a couple, most of the guys we're talking about today are going to be zeros or ones or twos. Even a 5 or a 6 steal catcher is still a bit of a plus.
Yep.
In the rest of this range, I find it hard to disagree here. Will Smith is kind of interesting, even though he wasn't great last year just because of the lineup, but he's still pretty damn expensive inside of the top 90. I don't really have a ton of hope that he's going to return top 90 value, specifically in a one catcher league. Like if you're taking Will Smith top 100, I just can't really see it. But Logan O'Hoppe, maybe it's just me with the with the Angels lineup, but I think, and a lot of it depends on Mike Trout and if he stays healthy.
Yeah,
but
very true.
Taylor Ward, Rengifo, Trout, Soler, Shanwell, O'Hoppe, it's not terrible, especially if Joey Bell's able to hit 20 home runs again.
Very improved lineup. Yep.
And Rendon announced today he's not going to be a part of it.
So
no
even more
distraction.
improved. Yep.
So yeah, it got even better today. I mean, I'm not sure how much I love Yohan Moncada, but I don't think it's a terrible lineup.
Christian Moore's knocking on the door. So there's stuff there. Zach Neto might not be out for long. So it's not as bad as the teams we've seen in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, if Trout gets hurt, then that's that's a lot of the team right there. But I think there is more hope than people probably realize. Just thinking Lowell Angels like we have the last 10 years or so. They are kind of depressing as a team, but I think that they are on the upswing here, especially if Trout can stay healthy. Even if we get one more healthy Mike Trout season, I think, because this has been something that has been talked about a little bit. Like Mike Trout is probably going to have one more healthy season. We just don't know when it's going to be. It's likelier that it's going to come sooner than later if it is going to happen. So, I mean, every year that goes by, it's a little bit less likely. If he's going to do it, this is probably the best year he's going to have to do it, if that makes sense. The best chance he'll have of staying healthy, the younger he is. The next group of catchers, I actually do kind of like, specifically starting with Tyler Stevenson, somebody that I've landed on quite a bit. I like the decent batting average I get, really good ballpark to hit in. After Stevenson at 11, it's Francisco Alvarez, Gabriel Moreno, Austin Wells, and Sean Murphy. Bubba, you said if you don't get earlier catches, you tend to like double tapping in this range, you said?
I doubled. Oh, there's two guys here I have a lot of shares of, and then in the next range I have two more guys. So, like this back eight, 10 through 18 or so, 10 through 17, very popular for me. So in this range, I am 100% on board Tyler Stevenson. I think if I got to pick one guy that I think way out exceeds his ADP at this position, I think it's Tyler Stevenson.
Yeah.
This is one of the few catchers I mentioned it earlier in this show that can hit for average. You can hit like 270 plus. Doesn't happen a lot at this position. This is a guy that has legit 20, I'd say 25 plus home run power. Dude's a big dude. It's just been a lot of ups and downs and things kind of out of his control in Cincinnati. So I think there's that. Going to be hitting fourth or fifth in Cincinnati. A lot of run production there as well. Could play first base to spell time at catcher, like we loved about Salvador Perez. Tyler Stevenson can get that treatment between DH and first base to get plenty of playing time there. I love everything about the guy. It wasn't too long ago where he was, quality contact metrics were through the roof. Then he was hitting for a great average. Had a couple injuries. He's back. Give me Tyler Stevenson all day long. And then Austin Wells, I'm still buying it. I understand there's concerns. Couldn't hit a lefty to save his life. ADP's dropped almost 200, though. And that still looks good to me. Like, they still hit him clean up throughout the postseason. Maybe they shouldn't have. The lineup's going to still be ridiculous with the Yankees. The backup situation in New York isn't one to scare you. So he's still the primary catcher. So at that ADP, preferably as a catcher 2, not a catcher 1. I like Austin Wells still as he keeps developing at the big league level. So those are my main 2 in this range.
Yeah, I like Wells quite a bit. The defense is fantastic. He's not going to lose playing time from that standpoint. Bit of power. Gets on base a hell of a lot. 11% walk rate, 322 on base. I guess it's not a crazy on base considering the low batting average, but the walk rate definitely makes up for that 229 batting average that he had. But yeah, I think those 2 are probably the big targets in this range. Francisco Alvarez, if he's healthy in that lineup, could be dangerous. I wonder if the hand is fully ready to go. And it seemed like down the stretch he did I think it was 5 home runs in September. I think he's mostly healthy. How confident are you that Alvarez is fully ready to go?
He seems fully ready to go, and I'm glad you mentioned him because he'd be the third one if I was going to go here. And the reason for it is if you like Cal Raleigh, if you like Shea Langoliers, why wouldn't you like Francisco Alvarez? Like, he's one of the other 30 home run guys that hits for a bad batting average. But he's also extremely young, so maybe he could become a 245, 250 hitter. That's not out of the question either. That lineup is insane. And at least the top half of it is very, very good in Queens there. So yeah, Alvarez, if you want to try for an upside player, you just want a ton of power. Like, he'll have more power than Stevenson and Wells easily. So I think Alvarez is very much in play in that regard. Just have batting average insurance when you take that pick.
He doesn't get a lot of hype, but Gabriel Moreno is also somebody that I've landed on a couple of times. A couple of steals you're probably going to get from him. It's a really good lineup, good batting average. I get that the home runs are a little bit underwhelming, quite a bit underwhelming.
Yep.
But do you have any interest in Moreno?
If I like Moreno, I'm just going to wait and go the guy north of the border that you like.
Yeah, okay.
Similar skill set going like 80 picks later.
That's totally fair.
Or not, like
one last guy in
30
this
picks later.
range. Sorry, whoa, I cut you off.
I said, sorry, 30 picks later. Looking at the wrong ADP there.
Yeah, and if anybody's curious if they're looking at NFBC and they didn't set any filters on this, I probably should have said this off the top. Like I said, I'm rusty, folks. You have to set the filters from January 22nd onward. I'm looking at the RotoWire Online Championship to give the taste of 12-team ADP, and we got 16 draft sample size to look at here. The last guy in this range is Sean Murphy, and I've heard really conflicting opinions on him. Some people love him. Some people think that he is destined for the bench because of Drake Baldwin at some point in the season. He's not somebody that I've been terribly interested in after that amazing first half of 2023. He was pretty terrible. Last season, he wasn't good, albeit there have been injuries at play. But do you have any interest in Sean Murphy here at an ADP of around 220?
I've never been a Sean Murphy guy. He's always gone a lot higher than this, so that's part of it. If you believe he's healthy, it's his job. Darn, with Travis out of town there, Baldwin looks awesome, but I'd imagine Murphy gets as much run as possible. If he starts to really suck, then Baldwin will take over there. So if you're a believer in health, go with Murphy. I am not going with Murphy. I just keep passing on this because he's not hasn't really healthy for a while, but even the small samples where he was healthy, he wasn't crushing things anymore. And Atlanta shows very clearly they have no problem platooning him if necessary, and that is a big concern. So price tag is at least affordable, or I understand the conversation because he's going like almost 100 picks higher in recent years, or I just completely crossed him off. So I get it now. I'm just still off of it. I'd rather gamble on Austin Wells, who I know is locked into playing time, or a couple guys going after him.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree. I like Baldwin a lot. I think there's a good chance that by the time we're into the midsummer, he's getting at least some of the reps, which, I mean, if you're getting a part-time catcher who's going in the top 15 by ADP, especially if you're punting, like there'll be some people who say, okay, I'm going to take Murphy as my first catcher and punt. Like if he's your second catcher, maybe, but I don't have a ton of confidence in him this year. The lineup's great, but he's been pretty bad with the injury concerns for a couple of years now. Moving into the next tier, I do like this tier. I got to be honest. Keibert Ruiz, Ivan Herrera, Connor Wong, who paid off dividends last season, Ryan Jeffers, and then your old friend, Joey Bart. What do you think of this group, Bubba? For me, there's a couple of names I like here, but I'll let you start it off.
A lot of guys I like as catcher twos. If God forbid I miss out on catchers, I can still survive here, is the way I feel about it. I'll skip other guys and take the kind of floors here. Keibert Ruiz, I absolutely love. This ADP blows my mind. I know he had a quote unquote down season, but people forgot he had a virus that made him lose 30 pounds. And he never really, once like the last month of the year, looked like the Keibert of old. Dude hits for an elite batting average, and there's at least 15 plus home run pop. So, like, if you like Tyler Stevenson, you should like Keibert Ruiz. If you like JTR, you should like Keibert Ruiz. Like, there's so many guys that Keibert Ruiz is very, very good. I think he's getting the short end of the stick on this one right now. So, love him. Lots of shares already. One of my most rostered players this draft season. Ivan Herrera. Love Ivan Herrera. I had a ton of draft and hold shares as my third catcher last year. Panned out to be very well. You can't really get him as your third catcher unless you're crazy aggressive at catchers this year. But with Wilson Contreras going to first base, Ivan Herrera hit over 300 last year with 5 homers and 5 steals in a small sample at the catcher's position. He tore it up in the minors, too. The hit tool is elite with Ivan Herrera. Very young player. Elite hit tool. Defense sucks. I'll clarify that right now. And the Cardinals can be annoying because Pedro Pajes is there who plays great defense. Hit tool sucks. So we see where this conversation is about to go. Because we saw that towards the end of last year. But the good thing I liked seeing, and it could still be an issue to start the year, but when Pajes would catch, Herrera would DH. So they kept his bat in the lineup. That gives me some hope there. It's a risky pick because the Cardinals could go full Cardinals and screw this up. Herrera should be the guy, though. Like, that team needs offense. He should be there. Love him if he gets to play even 120 games. Like, give me all the Ivan Herrera at that point. Other than that, like, I don't mind Connor Wong as a backup. Jeffers, if he could play a full season, would be great. And Joey Bart, I like a lot. It just got to wonder, is it a one-hit wonder or not? But at that ADP at 272, I don't hate it. So, yeah, this is a range I don't mind. But Ruiz, Herrera, absolutely love them. Post 200 ADPs, it's glorious. Give me all the shares, especially of Ruiz I can get.
For me, I think it's Herrera that interests me potentially even more. I like them both. I like really pretty much this whole range, especially for your second catcher. But Herrera gives you a little bit of speed. It's probably not going to be a ton, but like we mentioned earlier, you don't really need a ton to be profitable in that department from a catcher standpoint. He hit 301 with a 293 expected batting average, so it wasn't just like some BABIP-fueled miracle. He underperformed his expected slugging and his expected WOBA. There's a lot to like here. And the projections it's kind of interesting. All of them are projecting fewer than 100 games, which seems kind of light. I think that at least, like we were saying, 120, 125 should be at play at least.
Yep.
So I like this a lot. I like getting him as the second catcher. If you're feeling extremely bold and you want to punt and go for 2 of them in this range, I've heard worse ideas as well if you can pull it off. And then Joey Bart is somebody who's really interesting because he was fairly highly touted. I don't think he was like a top prospect, but you guys were expecting some
Oh,
stuff from
he
him.
was a top prospect for the
Was
Giants.
he?
Yes,
Was
for
it?
the
Was he?
Giants. For the Giants, he was. Yes,
For
yes,
the
he was.
Giant, okay, for the Giants, he was. Forgive me, I'm not the biggest prospect guy. And he didn't do terribly well in San Francisco. He did hit 11 home runs in 2022, but he really kind of broke out in Pittsburgh last year. The barrel rate was nearly 10%. Hard hits, nothing special at 38%. But I think he's a decent late source of power who probably won't lack for playing time. I feel like he's probably going to get the runway there in Pittsburgh. Do you think that there's any chance of like, I mean, Horwitz got hurt now, and there's talk
Yeah.
of like Andy Rodriguez at first, and I don't know about Henry Davis at this point. What the plan is? Do you think that the plan is Joey Bart to get everyday reps in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, it's Joey Bart's world, and we're all just living in it. That's one thing that's beautiful is as you get farther down the draft board, you get so much more of the platoon situation. Like I compare catchers, at least platoon wise, as running backs in football. Like there's a couple of elite guys, and then it starts turning into you're hoping for 100 games type stuff. And Joey Bart, he should, barring injury, easily get to 120. If not, he's in a perfect world is over 140 when all things are said and done. Because I think Henry Davis is dust. Andy Rodriguez has always been hurt, hasn't done it at the big league level. So tons of question marks there. So I do like Joey Bart. Just a matter is can he stay healthy enough? Because if he stays healthy and plays as the primary catcher, 15 to 20 home runs is very much in play there, maybe more. Like the power is very legit.
Let's move on to the next range. Another range that I kind of like shopping in, honestly. Alejandro Kirk at 21, Bo Naylor 22, Danny Jansen 23, Jonah Heim at 24, and then Hunter Goodman at 25. Kirk, you mentioned earlier, somebody if you're looking for some late batting average. I've always been a Kirk guy. This is the first year where I've kind of taken a foot off the gas a little
Really?
bit. The projections, they're still calling for anywhere from like a 106 to a 120 WRC plus from Steamer, which feels a little bit rich for me after what he's done over the last couple seasons. Do you think that Kirk can get back to a semblance of what we saw in 2022? And I mean, he started the All-Star game for the American League. Do you think there's a chance that he can get back to quote unquote star catcher territory?
I do for two reasons. Well, A, post 300 ADP. Like,
Yeah.
what are we doing here? If it sucks, you just drop him, which is great.
Yeah.
Second reason why I think he can is in years past, Joe, it's always been Danny Jansen and Kirk platooning in a mess there and whatever, where we saw Kirk start to play regularly in the second half last year, and it seemed to kind of start to resemble his former self, which was great. I'm not looking for a ton of power with Kirk. I think we all hoped he'd have it. I don't know if he ever is going to have the elite power we want. But to get a batting average source this late, a guy that should produce an okay amount of runs in at least a Jays lineup, it's very top heavy, which you can take advantage of hitting fifth or sixth in that lineup. So at his ADP, it's worth taking a shot. I'll say that much because the fact the platoon's out of the way gets me pretty excited there.
I'm also kind of excited for my boy Danny Jansen.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sad that he's not a Blue Jay anymore. He just seems to love bouncing around the American League East at this point. But in Tampa, in that new ballpark, in a lineup it's Tampa. They usually seem to figure things out. They got a lot of returning pieces Josh Lowe is kind of the main one for me, but you also got Caminero, who should do great things. And then Danny Jansen there as, an afterthought here is a 23rd catcher off the board, pick 336. A hell of a lot of power. If he's able to stay on the field, which has always been the thing with Danny Jansen, because the game's played 94, 86, 72, 70. He only cracked 100 games once, and it was 6 years ago now. So how worried are you about Jansen from an injury standpoint? Or is that just something that you kind of just bake into the cost and just don't worry about it?
It's 1,000% baked into the cost for me. Like you just kind of expect it, but it's the old adage when Danny Jansen's on the field, dude crushes baseballs. That's what he does. Like he hits for a ton of power. They're going to be playing in the that minor league ballpark for most of the season. They'll be on the road. It just comes down to health. And the other thing is because you go back to the Kirk thing, the platoon, Tampa Bay's got garbage at catcher. So as long as Jansen is healthy or 80% healthy or can at least put his spikes on and go sit behind the plate, he's gonna catch. Like he's gonna be out there 4 or 5, at least I'd say at least 4, probably 5 days a week. He is the catcher in Tampa Bay, which at this ADP, you roll with it. He gets hurt, you drop him, you move on. But at a 336, like that's one of your last picks in a 12. You take that all day if you want to punt the catcher. And in a 12, I'm more like willing to punt a catcher, at least your catcher too, because there will be replacement value on the wire. So you go take a Danny Jansen, hope he stays healthy, crushes you a handful of home runs. If he gets hurt, you move on and pick up Joey Bart will be on the waiver wire, probably stuff like that. So Like, no, that's nothing, not a slight on Barber. I picked him up in all kinds of
I know.
12s last year. Like, that's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
So you can play that game. But Jansen, like 100+ games from Jansen, he's probably a top 20 catcher. I don't think it's going out of the 23rd now, so it's not going crazy.
Yeah.
I'd rather take Danny Jansen over Sean Murphy at 110 picks apart, basically 120 picks apart.
Not even close for me. Like, I'd much rather have Jansen. They both have a ton of injury risk. Murphy's in a better lineup, but yeah, I mean, it's Jansen all day for me. Even if they were going within 20 picks of each other, I think it would still be Jansen. The other guy in this range who has gotten some hype is Hunter Goodman, a guy who would potentially not be catching that you can put behind the plate in your catcher spot, which is always pretty valuable. Um, I don't know how much I love the actual skill set. He strikes out a lot. The batting average was a $190 last year over 70 games, but a lot of people are pretty interested in Goodman even as a catcher too. Some of the projections, Zips have him going over 20 homers. You got any interest there of a Hunter Goodman as your C2 or C3?
I loved Hunter Goodman when I was a degenerate drafting in November. As draft season's gone on, I've kind of been off of it just because the more you see the Rockies kind of work their outfield situation, how they brought back Stallings, who they love, like little things like that. I don't mind him as a catcher 3 if you want to, because the power is undeniable. And if you get a good Rockies week and all of a sudden he's the primary catcher for a little bit, it could pay off in spades. In a fab league, it's very tricky. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and Colorado, like the lineup is just so atrocious. Like, I got a video that's gonna be coming out for Fantasy Pros either today or probably tomorrow by the time you guys are hearing this, talking about some fades. And I'm not interested in Brenton Doyle. I'm not interested in Tovar, really. Like, there's a lot of warts, even on the guys that are perceived to be, just quote unquote stars in that lineup. There's some trouble. Like, nobody's projected for a WRC plus over 97. That's where they are. It's pretty
wild. That's wild. When you play half your games in Coors Field, you're not protected over 97.
It's awful. If you look at everybody home and away, like it can be bad. If you're talking about a stretch where they're playing 10 to 14 games on the road, there's a good chance you don't want to have Hunter Goodman. I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, early draft season as a C3, he's gone up a little bit in price. It was fine in November, December, but I don't know how much I want to be investing in a guy for the Rockies who, as of today, roster resource doesn't even project in the starting lineup on opening day. So there is some risk there for sure. Moving into the final group, or not necessarily, there's a couple outside of this, but the 26 through 30 range: Patrick Bailey, Travis d'Arnaud, Luis Campusano, Miguel Amaya, and Adrian Del Castillo. I've been kind of interested in your guy Patrick Bailey this season. I think it's just because of the playing time that you're going to get out of a guy going so late. Patrick Bailey is arguably the best defensive player in the majors, regardless of position. He's on a very short list. He's not somebody who is going to lose playing time. He's 120 plus games locked in, a little bit of power. He's going to steal a couple bases. The plate skills are fine, 8% walk rate, 22% strikeout rate. It feels like he's an afterthought for no reason, really. Like, he probably should be going like in the Naylor, Kirk, Jansen type of range, probably, but he's going quite a bit later, 40, 50 picks. Am I crazy here? You're the San Francisco guy, Bubba. You watch him a lot more than I do. What are your thoughts on Patrick Bailey?
Yeah, the ADP is great because he's going to play primary catching role, which is, as long as he's healthy, he's a defense will keep him out there. It's back-to-back years now. He's slowed down at the end of the season, kind of worn out. Mike Krukow actually called him out on local radio a couple of days ago about getting his butt in shape, because he's all, I need you to be able to catch in October as well, so figure it out. Which I don't disagree with. Because early in the year he hits a lot better. Like, the hit tool is fine. I don't think it's overwhelming, but at his ADP, if you want to wait on catcher, it's not a bad catcher too, because he's going to play a ton. So I get it.
Luis Campusano is somebody that I've had some interest in. I feel like you've had some interest over the years. I remember last year in spring training, he was doing this wacky shit with his batting stance.
All downhill from there.
And I mean, his WRC plus in 2023, it was just 50 games, but it was 133. And then over 91 games last season, it dropped 50 points down to 83. So he's still young, Campusano. He's still 26. Good lineup, but I mean, what are we doing at this point with him? Is there any hope as a C2? Is he a viable guy in a 12-team, 2-catcher league for you?
In a 2-catcher, 12-team or less, yes. 15, I don't trust it at all. But a 12, like, the skills were there. We've seen the skills with Campusano. They were so bad that last year he got sent to AAA. So it's kind of a tale of two stories. The one bright side is they let Higashioka go, and the backup situation is nothing to be scared of right now. So they're trying to give him a chance to see what he has before Ethan Solves comes up in another year, probably.
Mm.
So going into camp, he's the catcher one. And at that point, if you're drafting, that's a good catcher one to have at his ADP of 353. I'm not all in on him. It'd definitely be like a oops, I forgot a catcher. Let's draft the catcher thing, or take a chance as a catcher 3. Just
Yeah.
because I do believe the talent is there. It's just, will he find it again? That's the $1,000,000 question. And that stupid batting stance change was just beyond, what are we doing? Like, he almost was looking like Aaron Rowan. And you never want to look like that, where you look like you just went to Taco Bell and have to take that bat. So it's not a good combination right there.
It was bizarre. I remember immediately seeing that one clip, and you shouldn't usually do this, but I saw this clip and it's like, okay, he's going down the rankings like 6 or 7 spots. Like this is ridiculous. And the rest of the group here, there's not really so much to love. Probably Miguel Amaya, Adrian Del Castillo, David Fry, who I believe is going to miss at least the first half of the season or so after having surgery. Freddie Fermin is somebody that I don't think I have a ton of interest in, but if he is going to play more than we're expecting in Kansas City, I guess it depends on the whole Pasquantino, Salvi Perez, first base, DH kind of thing. But Freddie Fermin is somebody who can hit for a decent batting average. The lineup is not bad. Any interest in them?
Freddie Fermin is a phenomenal catcher 3, because all it takes is one injury, and he is a pretty locked in catcher 2. Like,
Yeah.
because hits for average, power's not great, but the average part's a big plus. And I know I keep saying that, but the catcher average is so bad. So if you can find a guy that hits for average, it's like a big, big boost. And he'd be a guaranteed catcher 2 starter in pretty much most formats if he were to get regular playing time. So he's a Vinny or a Salvi injury away. That's all it is. And so he's got 2 guys he can play with. The other guy I love down there is Adrian Del Castillo.
Yeah.
I pounded the drum for Del Castillo last year, picked him up in Fab. It was glorious. The D-backs are loyal to Gabriel Moreno, so Del Castillo went back down, so on and so forth. I get it. And Del Castillo's defense isn't great. Stop me if you heard this with Ivan Herrera before. But his bat is phenomenal. It is amazing. And the one thing I loved hearing at the winter meetings, and again, it's all coach speak, we'll believe it when we say it, they said, yes, Moreno's our catcher. That's the way it is. But they want Del Castillo on the roster to be backup at catcher, potentially first base, and potentially at DH, because they want his bat in the lineup.
Hmm.
Again, believe it when we see it. That's fine. But in catcher 3 formats, I'm taking him all day long for the chance we get that guy in the lineup regularly. And again, one injury away from being I'd almost say a back end catcher 1, early catcher 2. If he starts regularly, the hit skills are undeniable. They're so good. It's just a matter of staying in the lineup because the defense is so bad. So I'll take that chance late on a guy like Del Castillo and see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, he hit over 300 last year. He's hitting for power. Like, it's definitely interesting, especially if they are going to think about using him at other spots besides catcher. Because, like you said, Gabby Moreno's probably pretty locked in there. But you never know, especially at this point in the draft. On the screen, I've switched to the draft champions just to expand out this last grouping of players, just in case there's anybody else that Bubba has any interest in. This is for deep, deep leagues, folks, going outside of the top 30 catchers. This is not for the faint of heart. But Bubba, anybody here? Is it a Dalton Rushing? Maybe I've heard some hype around him. Kyle Higashioka in Texas, maybe some Mitch Garver love. Anybody else here that we haven't mentioned yet that you are interested in taking a shot on?
A couple here. Higashioka, I'm not all in on, but just want to point out, keep an eye on him. I wrote about it in the ALPT tomorrow at HQ lately that he has massive reverse splits, and Jonah Heim can't hit right-handed pitching. So, like, there's a world where we see a pretty close to a 50-50 platoon or 60-40, which makes me off of Jonah Heim to begin with, because his numbers really aren't that great. So just keep an eye on Higashioka. He could be a guy that sneaks into some interesting playing time as the season goes on. Augustin Ramirez, Miami Marlins prospect, is the guy that I've been targeting in a lot of leagues, especially like we talked about earlier in the show, Joe. If you go get 2 early catchers and you can wait at the position for a catcher 3, Augustin Ramirez is a catcher 3 I like to wait for. Like, big fan of that. Dude's got insane pop. Nick Fortes should not stop anybody from being a catcher on a team, especially a Marlins team that's garbage. So Ramirez is either going to catch pretty early, or they've already flat out said they're going to start working him out at first base, because Jonah Bride is the first baseman. Again, no offense to Jonah Bride and his parents that are probably listening. Augustin Ramirez, let's see what he's got at first base, because I guarantee he can close his eyes and have more power than Jonah Bride. So the Marlins, similar to what the D-backs are saying, it's funny because in DC, they're going pretty close to each other here. The Marlins want to find a way to get Ramirez's bat in the lineup. And that is very intriguing, because the fact they want to try him at first base and they still have Davis and De Los Santos who can play first base, who has a ton
Yeah.
of pop. It's like they want to put him at DH. Like there's a lot of moving parts there. They want Ramirez out there is the point. So Ramirez is a guy I like getting very, very late, along with Adrian Del Castillo, who we mentioned. Those are kind of my primary catcher threes if I can walk away with them.
The Marlins are strange, and even like what we're projecting at Fangraphs is De Los Santos isn't even on the major league roster right now on roster resource. He's not listed as a starting first baseman or even on the bench. He's in AAA. Is Jonah Bride really that much of a roadblock for him?
I think they
Probably
just want
not.
him to produce to trade type thing. That's all it is. That's the
They're always
Marlins
such
recipe.
a stupid team, man. Like the Max Meyer stuff last year, they pissed me off so much. Like
Just remember last year at the trade deadline, they traded like 20 players. Like not even it was like 18 players, and it was some stupid number where they had to call in so many guys the day of the game just to fill a roster.
all to get Trevor Rogers. Really brilliant stuff. Unbelievable. Dalton Rushing, I alluded to him, and you mentioned earlier that you're not so hot on Will Smith. Is there any chance that Rushing takes over that job at any point?
No, if Will Smith's healthy, the Dodgers like him. That's the
Yeah.
difference. Like I don't like him for fantasy. Will Smith's a good real life player. I'm not gonna deny that. But
Yeah.
I just not in it for fantasy at his price point. Now, if he were to drop like JTR, we'd have a discussion. We don't.
Yeah.
And I like Dalton Rushing a lot. It's just where it's like there's no room at the end. If injuries were to happen, Rushing would be very attractive. Yes.
I don't think there's any other catchers that have much hope here. I'm just, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm scrolling through the remaining catchers that are being taken into catcher leagues, NFBC, mostly prospects, people just taking deep shots.
There's two.
Nothing.
There's two you kind of scrolled by there if anybody's really bored because they're more prospect wise. Like Moises Ballesteros for the Cubs. If Amaya hasn't been that great, if he struggles, Ballesteros could get some run. Very, very good hitter, not a great defender. You got Dylan Dingler in Detroit. He had a ton of optimism and power in the minors. Got a small cup of coffee, wasn't really there. They like Jake Rogers the way he catches this young staff, so that's kind of the biggest deterrent for Dingler. But again, maybe they switch to wanting more offense, or Rogers gets hurt, so Dingler could be a dude. And then Edgar Cuero of the White Sox. Corey Lee's there. Corey Lee, again, he's not great. Like he had his moments, not great. Edgar Cuero, it's just a matter of do they want to start the clock on him or not. Another guy that's got a pretty good hit tool that I guess is actually a decent defender as well, so he could transition there. But the White Sox probably want to delay the clocks as long as possible. So those are guys that are going super late. If you're like, we're talking 500, 600, 700 ADPs, all prospects, not guaranteed playing time, but guys that I wouldn't be shocked if some point this year you see some playing time out of.
Bubba, I'm going to ask you one last thing here about catchers. The whole pool, let's just say most people are probably playing in one catcher leagues. So if there's one catcher out of the entire pool that you need to walk away with and one that you are not drafting no matter what, who would those two names be for you?
Well, like in a perfect world, I want William Contreras every time, but let's be realistic here. So we in a one catcher league, if I'm waiting on catcher, most likely it's who? Okay, so if I'm waiting on catcher, I've really been planting my flag on Tyler Stevenson.
Yeah.
So I would say I'd try to leave with Tyler Stevenson. If you, I'll throw a curveball. If you want to just punt it and wait, get Kyber Ruiz or Ivan Herrera. Like just do that with one of your last picks. That's what I would go with there. But give me Tyler Stevenson for sure. And the one guy I won't have any shares off, instead of doing a high pick because that's easy, I'll go Sean Murphy.
Hard to disagree with you there, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, KC Bubba. He is the absolute best when it comes to breaking down catchers. So grateful that you can join me here as we get this show back and moving. And once again, everybody, I do apologize for going dark for so many months. There's been a lot going on, but we are going to be ramping back up here. First base is next. Bubba, thank you so much for coming on. I want you to tell everybody where they can keep track of your work because there is a ton of it that people should be focusing on.
Thanks as always, my friend. It's great chatting with you as usual. We got the Bubba and the Bloom podcast coming at you multiple times a week with Ryan Bloomfield. As you mentioned, we got the Patreon over there as well. So come check that out, patreon.com/Bubba Bloom. Bench with Bubba podcast, kind of still got about 10 more teams to go on the team-by-team previews for the year, amongst other stuff there. And Ben Tidd joins me once a week for some goodies. And then written content, Baseball HQ, Fantasy Pros as usual. And check me out on Twitter at BDentric.
Make sure you guys are following Bubba. Subscribe to the Patreon. They do such a great job, Bubba and Ryan, and it really is worth your time and your money to support great people who do such fantastic work, constantly pumping out podcasts, articles, charts. Like I use that draft tracker for all of my drafts.
Ryan's a genius.
There's a lot to really love there, and you're supporting a couple of great guys as well. If you want to check out my work, Patreon as well. You can check out the link in the description of the episode and be on the lookout because Bubba and I, at some point this season, will be co-hosting the Fantasy Pros Baseball podcast again. I am sure once football takes over the mind of the masses, we will be in there talking baseball. So be on the lookout there. But until then, everybody, take care and have yourselves a great night.